Hi church, how you going? My name is Justin, for those who don't remember me. I've come and spoken for you guys a few times, but today we're obviously separated by COVID and we're not able to meet in person, but that's all right. I thought I would make a bit of a video, but you're actually going to come with me on a bit of a journey. We're going to go on a walk today in the Blue Mountains National Park in a place called Glenbrook Gorge near my house. Mainly because today we're talking about self-control. And when Glenn suggested this topic to me, or told me that I'd be speaking on this topic, I kind of laughed or chuckled out loud, because I'm either fully qualified or not qualified at all to talk about this topic. It's something that I struggle with. I'm sure it's something we kind of all struggle with. Maybe it means I can actually share some very real insights as to the struggles and things that go on in self-control. But I don't want you to think I'm some criminal or something like that. I'm not like, oh, I keep killing people and I can't stop it. But it's just something that is challenging. So we're going to go on a bit of a walk today. And sometimes I see this as something that helps my self-control. When I feel like I need to do exercise, or I'm a bit down or something at home, it helps me to get out and actually, get out into the environment and see the world a little bit and stuff like that. And that sometimes you just have to force yourself to do that. And that's sometimes part of self-control. Sometimes self-control can feel a bit regimented, and it can feel a bit like, you've just got to stick to something and do it. And often, I don't think that's the worst thing ever. So come with me on this journey, and we'll talk a bit more about self-control. So I'm going to call this talk, if you're taking notes, this might be helpful. I'm going to call this talk, Who's Got the Controller? And I know you're all sitting in your houses, but if you could just get a show of hands, who remembers like the old Nintendo 64s, or the ones that you're like, when it didn't work or something like that, you're like, like blowing into this thing to make it work again somehow. I think a combination of spit and air made these things work. But yeah, who remembers like Nintendo 64s, or maybe like the PlayStation, or the very first PlayStation, like the box one that's like you needed real discs and real games and things like that. But maybe you're not old school, maybe you haven't got an old one, but even these days we still have game consoles and things like that. But something that is quite common to almost every console, any kind of console that you have, is they all have a controller. Whether it is a Wii, whether it's a wireless controller or a wired controller, whatever, all of these things had a controller. And I think that's something significant to show that no matter what you wanted to happen in this game, we haven't changed, I guess, from someone being in control. Someone still needed to control Mario back in the day. Someone still needs to control these crazy, 3D worlds and all these sorts of things that we have these days. And I think something we can learn from this that relates to self-control is that no matter how advanced we become, no matter how old we get, no matter how new you are, no matter how smart you are, we all need control. We all need self-control, actually. And that's something that I think is, sometimes we get a bit resistant to it. We hear the expression self-control, and we think, oh, that's something I don't need, that, I've got that nailed down. But often we don't. So I think we need to sort of have a bit of humility when it comes to this topic and go, okay, sometimes I'm not very good at this. I don't know if you can put your hands up as well to say who's watching me, I guess, that has at least one area of your life where you could do with more self-control. So at the top of this talk, I don't want you to write yourself off if you think you've got this all nailed down. If you're a perfect human, I don't have much of a talk for you. But if you recognize that, yeah, you know what, I don't always have self-control nailed down, this might be something helpful for us all to kind of grow and learn together about what God sort of says about self-control and how He can influence and actually change our behaviors and our decisions and our whole lives, essentially, through self-control. So let's read a passage from Galatians 5 verse 22 and 23, where it says this. It says, but the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And it says there is no law against these things. Now, it seems kind of funny that self-control is mentioned at the end of this list, because if we think about it, realistically, to kind of carry out all the other fruit of the Spirit, you need to have self-control. If you're going to love other people, if you're going to have kindness and show kindness to other people, if you're going to have patience while you're driving on the road or whatever, you need to have self-control to actually carry that out. It's kind of like Avengers. I don't know if anyone's seen Avengers. Obviously you have. But there's Thanos basically has this big glove, and he goes around collecting all of these infinity stones. They are like the reality stone, the power stone, all these things that are kind of like the fruit of the Spirit in Avengers world. But what he needs is this big glove that he calls the gauntlet, and he puts this glove on, and all of the power stones and things like that, all of the infinity stones sit into this glove. And it's the glove that actually helps him harness the power of all of those stones. And I think it's actually the same with self-control. Self-control is almost like that glove, and we're kind of putting all of the fruit of the Spirit onto that glove. And it's only once we have self-control and once we're really using that sort of self-control that we can actually harness and actually start to live in those other fruit of the Spirit. So let's actually look at what self-control means. Well, self is obviously ourselves. It's talking about you. How do you control yourself? But it's saying control. How do we define control? It says the power to influence or direct people's behavior or the course of events. So if we relate this definition to ourself, you'd almost say the power to influence or direct your own behavior or your own course of events, essentially. Because if we don't have self-control, if you're just driving around being angry, or if you're eating heaps or something like that, or you're not doing exercise, if we don't have those control, the course of your life is going to change. You may put on a lot of weight, you may not be fit, you may end up speeding and going and doing the wrong thing and going and ending up in jail. So we're trying to basically look at how can we control ourselves, how can we control the course of our lives and control our behaviour. So maybe you're thinking, Justin, it's really not that big of a deal. Self-control is not like the Avengers Gauntlet. It's not like the one thing that can make or break your life. Maybe not that extreme, but Proverbs speaks of it quite highly. This is in Proverbs chapter 25, verse 28, and it says, "If you live without restraint and are unable to control your temper, you're as helpless as a city with broken down defenses, open to attack." Now, what this is kind of referring to is, back in the day, cities like Jericho and things like that, when we read about them having walls around their city, it's basically because when you were in a city or in a town or in anywhere, the only thing that was going to stop outsiders and robbers and thieves and stuff like that coming in, they didn't have security systems, they didn't have cameras, they didn't have all these sorts of things. They would just build walls up the sides and all around their city so that if you come along and want to get in, you can't. And we read about this in lots of places. Even Samson goes up to a city and picks up its gates and gets rid of its gates. And that was like, you read it now and you think that's really random, why would you do that? But it's because that is basically making a city open to attack. It's basically making a city insecure now. And so it actually does relate to us in that if we don't have self-control, self-control is like those walls around us, and if we don't have those built up, if we don't have those strong, we are open to attack. We are open to attack from the enemy. We are open to attack from friends. We are open to attack from ourselves, from our own desires and our flesh and our mind and all these sorts of things. We are quite open to attack from those things. And you may think, no, I'm not controlled by anything. Like, I am a modern person. I have, I can do what I like. I can be my own person. I'm not controlled. But I might suggest that you actually are. What is it exactly that might be controlling you? Maybe it seems like nothing, but when we look deeper, when we look under the surface a bit, we find that certain things do influence us. Certain things do change our course. Maybe it's clothes. Maybe when you go out with friends or something like that, you get changed several times because you are concerned about what you look like. And that is kind of controlling you. Maybe it's always running back to Instagram. Maybe it's always social media. Maybe that controls you to try and see how many likes you've got, try and see who's looking at your profile, things like that. That kind of stuff is controlling you. Maybe it's your routine beer that you have every time you get home, or several beers that you have every time you get home, or maybe it's just a glass of wine that you have with dinner, or maybe it ends up with a bottle of wine at the end of each day. You see, these things slowly creep in and control us. Maybe, maybe it's not so cynical. Maybe it's like you go to 7-Eleven to fill up fuel and you get to the counter, and what's sitting next to the counter? Krispy Kremes. And every time you're like, oh man, I could really go for some of those. That essentially is controlling you. Maybe it's that girl or that really cute guy who sent you a DM on Instagram, or maybe who sent you a Snapchat and kind of trying to get your attention, trying to, start something happening or whatever. Maybe that is something that controls you. Maybe that's something that you can't resist. Maybe that's something you don't have walls built up against. All of these things, they do control us. They do have a level of control, and it's not that this is like there's no hope at all, but I think we just have to admit and go, you know what, I do need to work on this. I do need to have some intention in how I address this stuff. If I want my life to have a direction, if I want to control the course of my life, or if I want God to control the course of my life, I need to work on this stuff. I need to build up those walls so that I have a chance. Now, the thing is, not all of these things that I've just spoken about, they're not all sins. And that's the important thing to remember here, is that we're not often going for just what is sin and what's not sin. Like me coming and doing this walk, if I was to sit at home and not do this walk, it's not me sinning necessarily. And if you want to sit up at night and watch YouTube or watch Netflix or whatever, that isn't sin. I'm not saying that God's sitting there going, wow, why are you not doing anything right now? I don't want to add to that, but I think it's about trying to take hold of our lives and trying to look at, if I was to look 10 years into my future, what kind of decisions am I making now that are going to affect 10 years later? It's often like a boxing match, okay? We've got sort of two corners. We've got in this corner, we have sin. Now sin, responsible for the deaths of many people, responsible for ruining so many people's lives, responsible for years and years of alcoholism in family, responsible for years and years of anger in families, responsible for imprisonment of a lot of people. Like, that's the kind of accolades that sin has. But in this corner, fighting sin, we have life by the Spirit, or the Spirit life. And it is responsible for amazing things. It is responsible for Jesus, for the saving of the whole world. It is responsible for that whole list in Hebrews of everyone who is full of faith and who did amazing things for God and for the betterment of people, for God's people. And this is the kind of spirit that we want to kind of take on. And often it seems like when you wake up in the morning, or it's the start of a day, often it can seem like you're in the middle of this battle. And it's like you wake up and you hear ding, 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 sin coming up against the Spirit. And it's like every day we have to stand there and we have to choose, okay, whose side am I going to fight for? Am I going to choose sin, or am I going to just choose a lack of self-control today, and I'm going to stand in this corner? Or am I going to stand in this corner? Am I going to go, God, you know what, I need your help. I can't do this by myself. I need you to help me with self-control. I need you to fill me with your Spirit so that I can fight sin today. And often that's a really hard choice to make. Often I'm not saying it's easy at all, because I struggle with this as well. When you're waking up and you're sort of going, I don't want to do anything today, or you know what, I just really want to get KFC on the way home. I don't know what it is for you. You've got to kind of set up your goals. But ultimately, if we want to live for God, we have to choose the Spirit side. We have to choose to say, God, fill me with your Spirit. I want to display all of your fruit of your Spirit, and I want to be filled with that, and that opposes sin. And we have to fight against that. And sin will try every single day. You'll get back up the next day, ding, 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 and the boxing match will start again. You'll probably get halfway through a day, ding, ding, ding. You'll get home at the end of a work day, and you'll stand there, look at the fridge, ding, ding, ding. This kind of battle is going to keep going on, but it's about trying to make the decisions easier. How do we do that? How do we actually make those choices easier? Now, maybe you're like me, and sometimes you're traveling along and you think, Justin, I don't know how I'm going to fight this. And I'm kind of seeing that right now. If you can see in front of me, I've been following a track so far that seemed pretty clear, but as I get to this bit, it seems like there is just rocks down everywhere, there's trees down all over the place, there is water, and it makes you just think, I don't know if there is a way ahead. I don't know if there's just an easy track through this. I don't know if there's just a way to do this very easily. And I think all it takes is just taking one step sometimes. And I think sometimes it's not about achieving and fixing the whole problem in one go, but as you find, as I'm approaching this track, as I step closer and take more and more steps towards it, I find, you know what, there is actually a way to get through this. I can actually just step a little bit further here. I can actually, and before you know it, you are finding your way through alcoholism. You are finding your way through your anger issues. You are finding your way through your lusts and stuff that you have. And you are making progress. And sometimes that may be hard, but sometimes we have to just put reminders or something like that. You might have to print out paper and stick it around your house to remind you to pray and just ask God, please help me in this area. Or maybe you have to, ring a friend or get a friend to message you every day and say, you know what, can you just check on me every day and just make sure that I'm praying, making sure that I'm reading my Bible, making sure that I'm going well with my temptations of other things. You can have, in one moment, when you're having a great pep talk with your friends, you can in one moment go, you know what, I would absolutely love to have self-control in this area. I'd absolutely love to start going for walks. You know what, I'm going to start going for runs. Yeah, that's a really good idea. And you have this thought in that moment, and then later on, your emotions kind of come in and they just go, you know what, I'm not vibing a run. What I am vibing is some of those Krispy Kremes from 7-Eleven, and I want to go home, and instead of studying or doing what I should do at home, I'm going to sit on Netflix and watch 10 episodes of The Office. Now, that is a very real situation for some of you, but it's something that we kind of have to fight, and sometimes quite forcefully. And that's where you need to get friends and stuff involved, and bits of paper around your room, or alarms on your phone. My sister at the moment, I didn't know alarms could have this many. I didn't know iPhones could have this many alarms. So many alarms are going off throughout the day. But, sorry Hannah for dobbing you in, but they are all to do with certain things that she's trying to remember. She's trying to pray for her family or her friends, and so she'll set an alarm for a certain time so that she doesn't forget to do that. And I think sometimes we have to just have that kind of tough love with ourselves and go, you know what? I need to just do this. I can't keep fighting this emotion. I can't keep fighting this feeling. I just got to step out and do it. Maybe you've just got to chuck your exercise pants on. When you get home, don't even sit on the lounge. Just chuck your exercise shorts on and do it. Now, I know a lot of these things that I'm talking about, or the things that you may be thinking of as I'm speaking about this kind of thing, may be stuff that, you don't love talking about. Maybe it's stuff that nobody else knows about. Maybe it is, the one thing about yourself that you really don't like. And that's okay. We all have areas of our lives. Maybe this isn't it for you, but maybe this is really bringing up a lot of emotion. Maybe this is really making you annoyed with how you choose to live your life sometimes. Maybe it makes you annoyed with how you, when that ding 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 goes off, which battle you end up choosing to fight for, or things like that. But I think the big thing is that we can't let the enemy, we can't let Satan get us down in these areas. We have to learn to fight the battle in an open arena, I guess you could say. Instead of getting beaten up in a quiet back alley that no one knows about, and you're sort of dealing with this kind of stuff completely on your own and completely by yourself in isolation, it's very hard to win a battle. It's very hard to fight sin in the dark when no one's around. And I think something that really helps is if you can get that battle to happen in front of people. I guess that's a weird way of saying it, but what I mean is if you can bring friends in on things that you struggle with, if you can bring your family up to speed with things that you struggle with, it just means that you've got more spectators around to go, hey, how are you going? Hopefully they're really encouraging people. Hopefully they really want to see your victory in this area. But that just helps so much, that not only are you praying at the start of a battle to kind of go, God, please help me to do this well, but you've also got people who are kind of coming in and going, hey, you know what, I really want to support you. I really want to see a victory in you in this area. And I really want to see God work and bring this fruit, really strongly out of your life. And they're the kind of people that you want to get around you. So go and find those people. If you need a mentor, if you need a really good friend, if you need a Bible study group or whatever, reach out and find it. A lot of the time, these things just don't come to us naturally. And if you sit there and just don't make any effort towards this sort of stuff, it won't happen. I want to read you guys something that I found really encouraging from C.S. Lewis's book, Screwtape Letters, which is essentially written from the perspective of two devils kind of talking to each other about how they can try and deceive humans and basically take them away from God, who they call the enemy. They're basically describing this disgusting way that God likes to deal with his people. And how patient he is and how he deals with us, even when we aren't very good at things, even when we've been stuffing up our self-control and stuff like that. God is still good. But it says this, it says, he wants them to learn to walk and must therefore take away his hand. And if only the will to walk is really there, he is pleased even with their stumbles. I'll read that again. He wants them to learn to walk and must therefore take away his hand. And if only the will to walk is really there, he is pleased even with their stumbles. And that's just so encouraging to me that I know even when I don't nail my self-control in a day, even when that ding 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 happens and I choose the wrong fight or whatever, or I don't win the battle, God sometimes lets us lose some battles. He sometimes doesn't rescue us from every single thing. And it's like when someone's trying to teach a baby to walk, you have to let go of the baby at some point to let it kind of do its thing, to let it to try and walk by itself. And God does a similar thing with us when it comes to this kind of thing. But it says here that he just wants you to have at least the will to want to do this sort of thing. He wants you at least to have the will to fight your sin. He wants you to have the will to get better with your self-control. And he says, even then, work at it and try hard, but even then, even if you stumble, he's still pleased that you tried. And that's just so encouraging to me to know that there's a Father so gracious, so loving, so kind. No one's getting angry at their baby. You're trying to teach your baby to walk and it falls over and you go, what the heck's the point? Why am I doing this? No parent does that. The parent just goes, how good, there was 2 steps there and that was so exciting. And you think 2 steps is not really walking, but it doesn't matter from their perspective, from God's perspective, him seeing you take 1 step in some area towards your self-control, in some area towards gaining that control back of your life, he gets so excited and he's so pleased with the effort that you put into that. Now, the thing is with this sort of thing, like I've been walking now for probably about an hour and it feels like it has been taking ages, but you have to think about the end goal. Now, I'm not sure if you guys can see this in the camera, but probably about up there where I'm pointing, there is a lookout which is the goal of this walk. That's where we're going to end up. We sort of walk all the way through this gorge and we end up there. And I think that's kind of for me. When I do this walk, that's my vision. Yes, there's a lot of beautiful things along the way of this walk, but ultimately I want to end up there. And we have to do a similar thing when it comes to our Christian lives. We have to look at vision. Now, vision can sometimes be something that gets us down. Sometimes you can think into the future of your life, and Satan likes to prey on this and go, you are going to end up like that. You are going to be exactly like your parents were. You are going to end up being an alcoholic exactly like every one of your family members. You are going to be terrible with finances because your family has never been good at that. You are going to be, and he just lists lies upon lies, and that's kind of his vision for your life. Satan loves to just steal, kill and destroy. His whole goal is to wreck our lives, essentially. And so if we're listening to that kind of vision always, that's where we're going to kind of end up. Our lives move in the direction of our strongest thoughts, and if we're always thinking that sort of way, if we're always thinking, I can't do this, I won't be able to do this, I can't fight this, I'm always going to just, I never have enough followers, whatever it is, that's how we're going to kind of shape our lives and our mindset. But what we have to do is to try and silence that voice, or get people around you that can encourage you with the voice of God. What's the voice of God in your life? He is saying, like Jeremiah says, I have plans for you. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Now, that is the kind of thing that I want for my life. I want someone who's going to care about where I end up in life. I want someone who cares about my 5 years, who cares about my next 10 years, who cares about when I'm 90. I want a God, I want someone controlling my life who can make that happen, who can end up at the good spot at the end of this, where our life doesn't just end in pain and misery and broken families and all these sorts of things, but it ends in glory. It ends with God. It ends with serving Him for our whole lives and being able to look back through our difficult times, through our valleys, and go, you know what, even in that time God was still working. Even in that time God used that difficulty, God used that thing that I struggled with, and now I could see that later on down the track He had a plan for this bit. I was able to help someone down there because I had been there before. God is so efficient like that. His economy is so good where He doesn't waste anything in your life. Things that we think are absolutely crap and all this stuff that we're trying to fight essentially, that we're trying to gain self-control over, God doesn't throw them fully in the bin. He kind of recycles them in a way, and He goes, hang on, I'm going to use that. That struggle that you had with depression, that struggle that you had with suicidal thoughts, I'm going to use that later on in your life because you're going to be able to help others who have been there. That massive struggle that you had with porn and with lust, that is something that I'm going to help you influence other, like young men, young women, you guys are going to be able to use the weaknesses that you have now for good. God is strongest in our weaknesses actually. And that's often where we find the greatest testimony, is in the valley, in the weakness. But when we have the vision, when we have the goal of where we'll end up, that sort of helps us make each little decision along the way. It makes those decisions a little bit easier. All right, so a lot of you are probably feeling like, Justin, you haven't really given me, a nice 3-point sermon here. You've kind of just talked about self-control. Don't worry, I have a few points here. I probably have 4, I think, that are things that we can kind of remember and try and work on to help us be good at self-control. So number 1 is look ahead. This is important. Basically, what it means is when you are at a certain point in your life, wherever you are, look forward, look ahead as to if I keep living like this, if I keep making these decisions, if I keep the controller in somebody else's hands, where will I end up? Where is this journey kind of going? And that's important. Think about the vision. Whose corner are you in? And whose vision are you listening to? Is it Satan's vision of going, hey, you're never going to add up to anything, your life isn't worth it, you will never get control of this, you're a failure, you'll always be an alcoholic, you will always be anxious, you will always be against your family in this, whatever it is. Look ahead and think, am I going to believe those lies, or am I going to listen to the Spirit? Am I going to listen to God and Him saying, hey, I've got a plan for you. I know where your life is going, and I know how to kind of take you to this next level. I know how to take you to the place you want to be. Are we listening to that voice? Are we listening to his still small voice, where he's saying, I have a hope and a future for you. I know the road ahead, and if you put your trust in me, if you kind of give him the controller, if we hand the controller to the Spirit of God in our lives, what he can do is incredible. So that's my first point. Look ahead. Where are you going? And do you want to kind of be there? Do you want to kind of keep heading that direction? All right, point number 2 is be humble. Now this kind of has 2 prongs. Be humble with yourself. So kind of be honest with yourself and say, you know what, I actually am not very good at this sort of stuff. I actually really do need self-control in this area of my life. I'm not very good at this kind of thing. I struggle with this a lot. This has been a massive issue for me. It's been a really long time, whatever it is. But put your kind of pride aside and just be humble and go, you know what, yeah, I do need help with this. And I need to make a change. Otherwise, my life's going down the wrong direction and I don't have control of it. So be humble, recognize that in your own life, but also be humble as you're dealing with everybody. I think that's a massive thing with self-control. It's kind of a fruit in the spirit in itself, but it is being humble to others as well, because if other people are kind of coming up to you and saying, hey man, look, I've really been struggling with this for such a long time, I need help myself, you know, can you please give me a hand? We can't have judgment or anything sort of harsh towards others, because we all know that we have faults in ourselves. At the start of this talk, I was sort of saying, you know, put your hand up if you know you need self-control in some area of your life. I'm sure almost every person put their hand up. We all have areas of weakness. We all have areas that we're not good at. And so if someone else approaches you and says, hey, look, I need help with this because I'm not very good at it, be humble. Go, you know what? Absolutely. I find this hard. I have, you know, sin in my life and I struggle with these sorts of things. You know, I'm going to try and help you with yours as well. So we have to be humble. But that also extends to other things as well. Like you might have to be humble in exercising your self-control. It may be that you know, you don't necessarily love the way your spouse or your parents or something like that have said something to you or asked you to do something, and instead of you biting back and going, hey, no, I'm going to be like, I want it like this, or I want to do it like this, or whatever, instead of biting back with your opinion, maybe just being humble and being self-controlled and going, you know what? Absolutely, I will do that. Having respect, having honor for your parents, having respect and love and gentleness with your wife or your husband or your partner or your friends, you know, that requires self-control in itself. So being humble, kind of putting your own inflated view of yourself down a little bit and just going, you know what, I'm going to view others as higher than myself is a massive help as well. Okay, point number 3 is make every effort. Now, I want to read something from 2 Peter chapter 1 that really speaks into this. It says, by his divine power, this is verse 3, by his divine power, God has given us everything we need for living a godly life. He has given it all to us. He's given us his spirit inside us. He's given us his power that raised Jesus from the dead. So he says everything is there for you to live this godly life if you choose. And then if we jump down to verse 5, it says, in view of all of this, in view of God basically showering all this blessing and all these promises on us, he says, in view of all this, make every effort to respond to God's promises. It says, supplement your faith with a generous provision of moral excellence, and moral excellence with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with patient endurance, and with patient endurance godliness, and godliness brotherly affection, and with brotherly affection love for everyone. And it says, the more you grow like this, the more productive and useful you will be in your knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, I think that's how we all kind of want to be. We want to be productive, and we want to be able to be effective in what we do in our lives. Like Peter says, make every effort to put in place things that you need to do. And that's a bit of a hard thing in this area, because sometimes we're not very motivated to do this, but try and do it. Make every effort. Call that person that you need to call. Have a conversation with that friend or that family member that you need to have. You know, delete the apps that you need to delete. Go a different way home that doesn't pass the bottle-o on the way home, you know. Go to extreme lengths to help yourself win these battles. Don't put yourselves in dark alleys with the enemy and box in a dark alley. Bring it out in the open. Have spectators, have people there cheering you on to go, you know what, you can fight this. When that ding, ding, ding goes on, have people there to support you. My fourth point is look back. Now, I know that seems weird. We started off with look ahead, and now we're saying look back. But actually, behind me, you can see here, this is the valley that I just walked through. I don't know if you can kind of see it snaking through here, but that's a really long way down right now, and it's a long way away. But it's cool for me now to be standing up here on this peak and to be able to look back at the difficulty, look back at the massive long track, look back at all the stairs, all the rocks, everything I had to do, look back and go, wow, wasn't that cool? What a journey. But also to be able to look back and go, isn't God good? And I guess where it applies to our life is that we look back on the journey that we've had. We look back at the difficulties we've had. We look at the way God has worked, and if we kind of put these things into practice, if we're making every effort, if we're getting help from people, we're praying and asking God to help us, that is going to be a beautiful picture. We're going to be able to look back and go, wow, how amazing is God? And it's going to lead us to more praise of Him. The other reason we look back, though, I think, is as we look back, it may be that you see other people who are still on a journey. Maybe someone is on the journey that you were on. Maybe someone's fighting the battle that you have fought. Maybe someone's in the ring with a sin that you dealt with, or that you have sort of moved on and you've gotten over a little bit. And we still have to stay humble if we're seeing someone else in that spot. Basically, we want to look back and try and encourage that person. Try and help that person and go, you know what, I know what it feels like to be where you are. I know what it feels like to be walking through that exact thing, and this is what helped me. And use really specific examples. Say, look, I can be someone who is accountable with you. I can be someone who will give you a call every day, every week, whatever it takes to help you. But look back and see, how can now the thing that I've come through, how can my weakness become my strength, or how can it become a help for someone else? All right, so that's everything I've got today, guys. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. Thank you for coming on this walk. I hope it was slightly helpful. I hope it wasn't too distracting. But I really just hope that you guys can really sink your teeth into self-control. I think this is awesome. This is where kind of Christianity, the rubber of Christianity hits the road. This is where the Bible actually starts to intersect with our hearts and our lives and starts to shape us and change us. And that's what it's all about. We're not perfect, we're sinful creatures, but if God can sort of work in us and transform us to become more like Himself, that is ultimately the best thing, and self-control will help us do that. So, God bless. Let me pray as we finish, and then you can finish, I don't know, having breakfast or doing whatever you're doing in your house. God, thank you so much that you are patient with us. Thank you so much that you understand that we are sinful creatures, that we are sinful people. God, we want to please you. We want to live lives of self-control. We want to live lives full of your Spirit and full of self-control, but it is hard. It's difficult. And yeah, essentially, we just want you to kind of have control of our lives, God. You are the best person to have the controller of our life. And I just pray that you touch all these people's lives where they're struggling, where they're hurting, where they've heard lies for so long, that you will break those chains. You will break those lies of the enemy, and you will actually move in there with your Spirit and fill them with hope. That you'll help them to just take one step at a time, and as they move through this journey of life, this journey of self-control, Lord, that you will be able to show them the blessings, show them the victories that they can have, and they'll be able to one day stand somewhere and look back and go, you know what, this was awesome. This was so difficult, and there's still a journey ahead, but from what I can see, God is so good, and He will continue to be good. So thank you for your blessings, God, in our lives, and just, yeah, I pray for the power of your Spirit to work in us powerfully, and shape us and mould us and change us as we follow you. Amen. See you guys. Bye.